From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back. It's Locked On Chiefs, and it is Combine Week. Big week for this league and this team in particular, and we're going to go through it all for you. Before that, as we get ready for that to hit, we are going to start today by taking a look at a couple of position groups that are going to be affected by what goes on in Indy, as well as the free agency that is coming. Chris from Chiefs Digest, I'm Ryan from RGR Football, as well as Rogue Analytics. The draft guide will be coming, and I'll have more information for you this particular run-up, trying to get things done a little bit behind, a couple of weeks behind, to tell you the truth. So, story of the day really is something that we didn't get a chance to touch on last week. The CBA has been provisionally voted on and approved by the NFL, and we thought maybe that we were going to get a vote on as soon as Friday from the NFLPA. That didn't happen, and now it looks like they're going to meet with the NFL on Monday in Indy during the Combine, and then looks like a vote's coming Tuesday. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, but I can't imagine it's going to pass either. You start looking at the ins and outs of the CBA, and from the players' perspective, they don't like going to a 17th game, and they don't think that they're getting enough when it comes to getting a 17th game or playing a 17th game. So I have a hard time believing it's going to pass. You look at the executive council, they voted it down, 5 votes yes, 6 votes no. So at that point, to me, that means it's probably going to die on the vote on Tuesday, regardless of what happens when they talk to the owners on Tuesday.
Yeah, it could be. See if they can get some clarification or some movement from the owners. I think it says something that the owners took this surprise vote, got it out there, and were like, here, we're just going to lob it into your court and see what you do with it. That feels like they're trying to squeeze something past them. I know the pay for Week 17 is part of it. I personally don't have a problem with a 17th regular season game, as so long as they're dropping one of the preseason games, which I think is, at this point, pretty ludicrous, especially for those veteran players that might have a problem with it in the first place. But my whole thing is, if you're going to play a game, make it worth something, right?
Well, and you have to be clear on that, because really the reality of the situation is that at the earliest, the 17th game would go in the 2022 season. So that's 3 years away. The only people it's going to affect are the top 5% of the players in the NFL that are making more than $250,000 a game. And at that point, they will have had to have not signed a new contract in the 3 years prior, because all of that will be adjusted out once new contracts are signed after the CBA is agreed to. So really, the number of people that 17th game check thing of $250K is going to affect is very, very small.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the bigger,
and really the bigger thing on that is the owners are trying to give it to the players in that regard, so they can keep the salary cap and everything else intact. So honestly, it's more of a giveaway than it really is anything else. It's an added bonus.
It's an interesting take on it. I don't think that the players see it that way, but I think they're a little clouded in general just by having to play a 17th regular season game. What do you think of that in particular?
Well, I get where they're coming from. I mean, they're trying to expand what they have and expand another and get into another week to where they can get to a point where they have 17 games that they can sell, and they think they're going to get a lot more money for that. And then the other side of that is they're also wanting to get to a point where they're playing the Super Bowl the week of the week after President's Day. The week before President's Day, the Sunday before President's Day. So they're wanting to move the Super Bowl back 2 weeks, basically. There's also talk of expanding the playoffs, but it sounds like the owners don't believe that they need the players to approve that.
I don't think technically that they do. I think the schedule is not up for debate when it comes to the NFLPA. I think they can delay that if they want to. I don't know that it really matters one way or the other, because I think giving playoff teams a little bit more time off is probably a plus. And I think if that's the way that it comes down just by mandate from the NFL, just because they're trying to flex a little bit, I don't think that's going to hurt anything.
Well, the other interesting part of this whole thing is it just came out that the owners and the NFLPA have discussed it, and they're allowing the franchise tag designation and transition tag designation to go back 2 more days. And they're basically buying themselves some time for the players to vote on the new CBA that's out there. So I think that's interesting. I still have a hard time believing it's going to pass. because there are some very vocal leaders out there that don't want it. J.J. Watt's tweeted about it. Richard Sherman's tweeted about it. There are some players that just are absolutely against going to 17 games. So you have to wonder if that's going to just be something that's going to kill it to begin with.
Yeah, it could be. We'll see what happens in Indy, and I'm sure we'll get some reports Monday. So we'll touch base with you here later in the week as well, folks. When we get back, we're going to dig into a couple of position groups that we need to take a quick look at before this whole combine thing starts. Some prospects there that could affect what's going on at these positions. So we'll be right back with you. So let's start on the defensive side of the ball, because I think the prospects and the change that's coming to the Chiefs organization is probably a little bit deeper on the linebacker side because you're going to lose a starter. And I do consider in the 4-3 base Reggie Ragland a starter. He is a free agent.
Well, you might end up losing two. We'll have to see what they do with Damien Wilson, but why does it surprise me that you want to start with the defensive side of the ball? I will say this. Anthony Hitchens, if he doesn't restructure his contract last year, I think he's probably gone this offseason. But because
this
of the
offseason before 2020?
Before 2020. But because of the fact that they restructured, it doesn't save them any money to cut him now. If he wouldn't have restructured to free up space last year, I think that he could have been gone before 2020 started. Just because he hasn't played up to the contract that he's got. So I think he's still here in 2020, mainly because the contract is something that at this point you can't really get any benefit from cutting him.
Right.
So I don't think that they're going to make a move there. The question I have is, are they going to make a move with Damien Wilson? I thought he played well early in the season. He kind of struggled a little bit in the second half. But, for the contract that he has, I think he's somebody that they could keep and they could play him. But they also might be looking at it and saying, well, maybe we can get a big upgrade in the draft.
Possibly. I think that's kind of a stretch to be a big upgrade, but I do think that they need somebody. I just think that you're depleting your linebacker position too much if you go and do that, knowing that you only have 5 draft picks right now. I think that's kind of problematic, but I expect them to keep him. I know technically there's an option that has to be exercised, I believe, by the first day of the league on the 18th of March. So we'll probably get a little more indication as that comes down, but that's 2 of the guys that played the most snaps. I think...
Well, just real quick, I just want to say real quick, it is going to be interesting because you sit here and you look at the Damien Wilson situation, it might come down to whether or not the CBA is signed. Mm-hmm. Because if the CBA is signed, then maybe Kansas City gets a deal done with Patrick Mahomes this year. If it's not signed and it goes into 2020 and we don't have a new CBA, Mahomes isn't going to sign a new deal.
Right.
And at that point, you're sitting in a situation where you're not necessarily going to be looking for as much cap space to be freed up, because really Mahomes was going to be one of the reasons you would want to free up a bunch of space.
True. Yeah, and I do believe you're right that they're going to wait. They're going to hang on that CBA being done before they do Mahomes' contract, because I think that just leaves too many things to be questioned if you try to rush it before that.
Absolutely. So, his could be up in the air, and I do think that they can upgrade the position, but you're right. It's a question mark of, with as many draft picks as they have, is it something they're going to be able to do this year? And it's really going to be difficult for them to do that, especially drafting 32. You would think that most of the linebackers that are going to be able to step in and give you a better starter than what Damien Wilson was last year, unless somebody drops and you're able to move up just a couple spots to get him, you're going to have a hard time upgrading that position, I think, in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, experience goes a long way. I don't feel like any of the big names are going to fall that far. One of the guys that I like is very similar to Damien Wilson in that he's a 3-down player. His name's Harrison out of Ohio State. We'll talk about him next week, folks, post-combine. I'm sure that'll be an interesting talk. But here's the interesting thing to me is I feel like Reggie could come back if they want to keep doing this platoon thing, right? Because basically they have 2 guys that can play 3 downs, or they feel comfortable playing 3 downs. I don't know that I do, with Hitch and Wilson. And then they have like the platoon deal where Reggie plays on the early downs against the run. Neiman comes in for the nickel snaps, right? If they want to keep doing that, I could see them bringing Reggie back. If they don't, then I worry that they're going to get caught up in athleticism. They're going to get caught up in guys that can cover really well, like Patrick Queen, like Murray from Oklahoma. There are a number of guys out there. And if you decide to draft them and try to plug them in, you end up putting yourself back in the same position that they were in last year where they couldn't stop the run. These guys are not run stoppers. They're very light for linebackers. I mean, they're even pushing light for will linebackers, and I don't think that that's what they're looking for. So my question to you is, do you think that they want to stick with that platoon? Do you think Reggie comes back, or do you think they're trying to revamp this whole position group?
It's hard to say. And I really wish I had a better answer, but it's really hard to say what they're going to want right now. Reggie Ragland is on the team, so to me it would make sense that they try to keep him, but at the same time, maybe he feels he just doesn't fit here real well. You know, if he wants to be an every down starter, I could understand why he wouldn't want to play here. And honestly, he could be looking at it and saying, you know, I really don't want to come back because I'm probably not going to get a market deal or anywhere near a market deal coming back and playing in Kansas City. But if I go get a free agent deal, then maybe I can get a market deal for, a team that I would really fit better.
Yeah, and I think that's the possibility. I do think there are teams that are going to look at him and consider signing him. I don't think he's like a guy that's going to go out there, look for a market, and not find any. So that definitely changes things, I think, in terms of what their plan is. But I really want to see them get 3-down linebackers at the cost of maybe a little bit in pass coverage. I think that's what they've been getting away with so far, because I don't think anyone would call Damien Wilson a coverage linebacker. I don't even think you can call Hitch that, to tell you the truth. And I know that's kind of how he was touted when he came over, but I'm not sure that that's the truth. Do you feel like in this day and age, it's enough to have a guy that is predominantly good at coverage and leave yourself susceptible to the run, or do you think it just doesn't matter because of the run game, very few teams being able to exploit it well enough to really put you in a hole?
Well, I think it matters. It's just a matter of, are you going to have enough pieces to be able to cover the other side of it? I mean, you know, if you can get to a point where you're going to be a little susceptible against the run, but you can stop the pass well enough, I think you're in a better position than if it's vice versa. Because I don't think there are going to be enough teams out there that can run the ball on you and hurt you near as much as you can be hurt through the pass. So if they could find a linebacker that could be a coverage linebacker and be, you know, decent enough against the run, I think they're in a better position than if they find a really good linebacker like Reggie, or they keep Reggie and it's a guy that they can't put in there for the pass.
So do you think Ben Neiman actually becomes a starter? Like, if we're talking 4-3, obviously he already plays a lot of nickel snaps.
I can't imagine he's a starter. He's too small.
Okay.
I don't think and honestly, the bigger thing with him isn't necessarily just his size, it's also his speed. He doesn't have the speed to be sideline to sideline. And although that's not needed at every single linebacker position, it's pretty important to have some of that. You know, it's interesting looking at the depth chart for Kansas City. They only list 2 linebackers in their starting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, really, it's a nickel-based league now.
Right. So obviously they're looking at it. They're a 4-3, but you know, obviously they're thinking we're not going to play base, you know, over 50% of the time. So, you know, it's a big question. You know, how many linebackers are you going to need that can actually that can stay on the field 3 times for 3 downs? I mean, 2 is great, but I just don't know. It's really hard to know what they're going to do this coming year, because Ragland is a chess piece that, you know, he helps against the run, but he is a severe coverage responsibility guy. So you got to figure that out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, and we just don't know what's going to happen with Dorian O'Daniel, so we'll just have to play it by ear at this point. So when we get back, folks, we're going to talk about the guys that they have to cover quite often in the tight end group. So this is a group that I find really intriguing because they're all gone. Wells, Blake Bell, and Deion Yelder are all free agents of one sort or another. I believe it's exclusive rights on Wells and Yelder. Obviously, Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce. So my question to you is, do you want Blake Bell back? Do you think that he's enough of a weapon to kind of revive and run more 2 tight end sets next season, or they just want to keep trying to split Kelce out and stay in 11 more?
I think I want Blake Bell back, but it's more of a sense of, well, part of it, honestly, is a little bit of a bias for me since Blake Bell's a Wichita kid. I think he was good enough for what they need for the number 2 tight end. Here's my key, though. I think they have the ability to go and make an upgrade. If he becomes the 3rd tight end, I think you're in a great position.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that that's really realistic because you're going to have to draft a tight end. In my opinion, you would at least have to draft a tight end in the top 3 rounds, and I really have a hard time seeing Kansas City doing that with Travis Kelce still here.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think a 4th round is about as early as you really want to go. I mean, the board always falls the way the board falls, so maybe you have a couple of tight ends that are up there in the 80s, 70s, and the other guys that you're looking for fall behind or get taken early. I mean, you fall behind the board a little bit. You never quite know.
And, it's one of those things. It's like if a tight end that you see is in the 20s and somehow he's still there at 32, do you make that move? Do you really use your first-round draft pick on another tight end? I mean, you could, but the one thing I will say is that's not a position I think that's going to get a lot of use. Although Patrick Mahomes would make it work, I guarantee that. I don't know that the value is there, so it makes it harder to go up and get in a first-round tight end when you really don't need that type of guy right now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there is such a thing as a first-round tight end to begin with, to tell you the truth. So I struggle to even see a second round being worth it, given the other things that you have to try to accomplish in the draft. So I'm kind of with you there. So I guess that brings us back to pretty easy to put tenders that retain Yelder or Wells or both. But Bell, you have to go out and re-sign. So if it's you, are you actively doing that? Are you looking around the league, or are you relying on the draft?
Well, I think you can re-sign him, and it doesn't have to be a record-breaking contract of any sort. I mean, I think you could give him another 1-year deal. I would imagine he'd want to play in Kansas City again after winning a Super Bowl ring. I mean, if you pay him $1 million, I think he comes back, and I think that's a reasonable contract for your number 2 tight end. You're not going to go out and sign him for $2.5 million. I think like Demetrius Harris just got from Chicago. So to me, if Bell's is willing to take $1 million to play here, I think that's a smart move for both sides, because honestly, Blake Bell, I don't think is going to find a better position to be in and a better place to be in than Kansas City, because he's going to be able to, he's not going to be a starting tight end. He doesn't have that skill set.
Right.
And in Kansas City, he at least has the opportunity to be playing for a Super Bowl every single year.
And I think that's a big draw, right? But my question is, I personally want more of a weapon. I want to be able to use 2 tight end sets and have Kelce not be the only guy that you can legitimately throw to with any, fear for the defense. I know Bell caught a touchdown for the first time this year, and we've seen Demetrius Harris make plays in the past, but not ever so much that the defense had to account for them. That's kind of the thing that I'm looking for. So I really want to see them find a weapon that they can line up in line and can still press vertically enough to really stress some defenses.
Well, and I'm fine with that, but the problem is that if you're going to do that, the best year to do that would have been last year, when you had all those tight ends that came out that they could have gone and got, and they just chose not to. So you have to wonder, is that going to be something that they're going to look to change this year? I would love to see Blake Bell be a third tight end in this offense. I think that would be a great position to have him because at that point he can do just enough catching the ball and block if needed, and be a good enough situation to do that. But at the same time, you're going to have to go out and spend a high draft pick to go get a guy that's going to create a situation where he has to be covered, or sign somebody that's a free agent. And I really don't think you want to spend money when you're probably going to end up having to re-sign Travis Kelce this offseason as well. Yeah,
that is coming. Let me ask you this. I know he's taken a couple of visits and none of them are in Kansas City yet, but do you go after Greg Olson? Do you think you can get him for a cheap enough contract to make it worth it?
I think he already signed, actually.
Oh, maybe I missed it.
I'm pretty sure he signed last week.
Okay. Well,
he signed with the Seahawks.
Then there went that plan. So, okay. I don't really see anybody else out there worth searching for in free agency either. And that Kelce contract coming, it's kind of rare. I know he was hurt his first season, so that kind of gives you one more year back. But I think an extension is in his future. I would like to see him play his entire career in Kansas City. Do you think that happens?
I think it really helps with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. The question I'm going to have is Kelce going to want to reset the tight end market? Because if he wants to reset the tight end market, I don't know that he can stay in Kansas City long term. Is he the best tight end in the NFL? Yes. Does he probably deserve to be paid like the best tight end in the NFL? Probably. But the problem is you have the reality of you're getting ready to pay Patrick Mahomes $30 to $40 million a year, and you're going to have to cut someplace. And I'm not saying Kelsey has to take the brunt of it, but he's going to have to take some of it if he wants to stay and play with his boy Mahomes.
Yeah, I think that may be true. I think that contract might even be worth 45-ish. It's going to be interesting. We're going to be back tomorrow, folks. We're going to continue to look at a couple other position groups, get ready for this combine, as well as discuss anything that breaks about that particular CBA agreement, anything going on in Indy. So keep your ears peeled. We appreciate you guys hanging in with us. I know this is just creeping up to the exciting part of the offseason where you can start looking ahead to the 2020 season and see if the Chiefs can repeat. We appreciate you hanging with us today, and we'll be back with you tomorrow. Ryan Tracy is the founder of Rogue Analytics and the host of RGR Football on YouTube. Follow him there. Chris Clark is a senior analyst at ChiefsDigest.com, where you can get his work. Rate and review at Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for